Hey, welcome back. This is week 8 of Fantasy Central. This is your host, Zach, and I'm here with our very own fantasy expert, the guru himself, Hefe.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? How we doing this week?
And I hope everybody's great. Real quick, if you're listening on WUBI Live Radio, we appreciate you guys sticking around as a Horseman Pro Football Talk just wrapped up. Reminder to all of you out there, you can catch the Horseman Pro Football Talk and Fantasy Central back to back on WUBI Live Radio. The app is available for free. Download on your app store, or you can head over to wubi.live for more information. If you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, or simply listening on your favorite podcast platform, we also appreciate you guys. We got a good show for you today. As always, Hefe is going to run down some guys that may be available out in fantasy backs and receivers for week 8. No surefire stardom situms this week. That's 100% on me. I've been caught up in some other projects the last few days, but you could still find my week 8 surefire stardom and situms on our website, horsemansports.com. So without further ado, let's get to it. Week 8, waiver wire. Only the Ravens and the Raiders on the bye this week, but that's a nice chunk of valuable players out there, plus big names like Devontae Adams, possibly out due to COVID restrictions. So who are you targeting on the wire to fill some roles this week, Hefe?
So we're going to start with the running backs here like we normally do. And first I'm going with Kenneth Gainwell, the Eagles running back, and with Miles Sanders likely at least out for a game. From everything that I've heard, it sounds like Miles Sanders is out at least one game. It's possible he plays, but if he's out, Kenneth Gainwell has shown enough over the last couple games. He should probably be picked up and rostered for somebody, especially with all the running back injuries. He should be rostered one way or another because he gets some passing game value. And I mean, the Eagles don't run a whole lot, so a lot of his value with Miles Sanders out, he'll get more rushing attempts. Obviously, he'll be the lead back there. So if he can get 10 rush attempts in that offense and continue to get the passing game value that he's had with some of the passing game value that Miles Sanders has had, Kenneth Gainwell could be very valuable, at least for a week. Like Zach mentioned, there are only 2 teams on a bye this week. But with all the injuries, it feels like somebody can use this guy, especially this upcoming week. He's running back 29 on the year as a backup. So that's at least flex consideration at this point. So he needs to be rostered. He's easily a top waiver wire pickup this week. The second one here, the only other running back I have for this week is going to be Brandon Bolden, which last week I talked about Ramondre Stevenson. And it seems that the mistakes he made in pass protection, even though he had a good game from fantasy perspective and in that offense last week, this past game that they just played against the Jets, Ramondre Stevenson was a healthy scratch. And in place of him, Brandon Bolden came back for him from his one game absence, and it looks like he is going to continue to take that James White role. We keep looking for the guy in that Patriots offense that's going to fill that role. And there have been a couple weeks where Brandon Bolden, when he's in the lineup, he looks to be the guy that's going to fill that role. So to me, Brandon Bolden, somebody that should probably be picked up. He had 19.9 points in this last game, and that was a blowout game. And most of his value is coming from the passing game. There probably won't be a whole lot of Patriots games where they're able to get the backups to get a bunch of rushing touchdowns like they were able to do against the Jets. But I think going forward, season long, Brandon Bolden could really help somebody out.
Yeah, absolutely. Both these guys prove that they definitely hold value, even being backups. Like you said, they both had pretty decent weeks last week, and the projections on them this week should be very high as well. So I like both of those pickups. It's interesting, only 2 running backs on the list this week. Do you have any thoughts on that, Hefe?
Yeah, I'm not real sure what that's about. I think it's because there were so many good teams on a bye last week, that like a lot of the good teams are playing this week. There are only 2 teams on a bye. The Ravens don't really have any running backs that you would need to replace at this point. And I actually wanted to mention Kenyon Drake for the Raiders. They're on a bye this week, so maybe if he's available in your league, you sneak him in. It's not immediate value, so he's not here for me this week. But Kenyon Drake, if he's available in your league, go ahead and pick him up because 2 games with John Gruden out and Bisaccia as the head coach, Kenyon Drake's value has gone up. Josh Jacobs continues to be injury prone and going out of games. Kenyon Drake looks like he can have value for the full season at this point.
Absolutely noted. Okay, let's move on to the wide receivers you have on your Week 8 waiver wire. Which one you want to start with here?
So I was going to start with Allen Lazard, but just about an hour before we started recording this, it came out that Allen Lazard is also on the COVID-19 reserve list.
Uh-oh.
So it looks like, NBA
is this a whole Packers wide receiving group going to be out on the list type thing, or you think these are isolated incidents?
Well, I don't think it's a coincidence that the top 2 receivers ended up on the list. So that's what, and the defensive coordinators on the list. So it's I keep waiting and looking at my phone, seeing if there are more notifications coming in, because you feel like at this point there are going to be a couple more that roll in. But if this is it, if it's just these 3 guys, I would replace Allen Lazard with Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Because obviously they're kind of forced at this point to bring him off of IR, whether they wanted to do it for the short week or not. So it sounds like he's going to be coming off IR. He's going to be playing in this game, and he'll essentially be wide receiver number 1. And obviously he has that deep threat ability. He can run past anybody. So Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a choice for this week. He's obviously, every other week to week, he's questionable. You never really know what he's going to do. But if you need a guy for a week to fill in, MVS could be that guy.
What do you think about Randall Cobb?
I think Randall Cobb also will have value in this game. He's coming into this game as, the veteran presence in that wide receiver core now. So, and obviously the past rapport with Aaron Rodgers, and he'll trust him. So I could see Randall Cobb having a nice game. I don't know if he'll have that downfield work, but I could see him having, 10 targets in this game with as limited as they are in pass catchers.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with you. I personally like Randall Cobb, even though he's ancient at this point, right? But especially when they get into the red zone, Aaron's kind of always looking for Cobb, just sneak a touchdown or 2 in there. So, hey, if he's getting 10 targets, if he can haul in 7, 8, 9, even 10 targets, and then throw on a touchdown, that's a pretty good week.
Yeah, absolutely. Anybody that would pick him up for a week will be very happy with that.
We'll see how it plays out. Who else you have on the wire this week?
All right, so going forward here, another wide receiver is going to be Russell Gage for the Falcons. He came back from injury, had a nice game, 16.7 points. And on the year, he's wide receiver 101. Obviously he's injured. He was out for a few weeks. But look, the Falcons pass a lot. And as long as they're going to be passing a lot, we just saw Calvin Ridley, Russell Gage, Kyle Pitts, and Cordell Patterson all have nice fantasy days. And, Cordell Patterson's, Mike Davis goes out of that game, so Cordell Patterson got more rushing attempts, so that he's a little different than the other wide receivers. But even still, we saw 3 guys in that passing game that are only involved in the passing game in that offense have nice fantasy days, at least flex value kind of fantasy days. That would be a very valuable flex asset right there. So if that's going to continue to be a trend and everybody's going to eat in that offense, then I think Russell Gage, especially in a 12-team league or a 14 or 16, Russell Gage absolutely needs to be rostered in pretty much any league. Number 5 here is going to be Michael Gallup, coming back from injury for the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know how I guess with all the injuries that have happened this year, maybe he was just a roster casualty because people needed other players to fill in positions. But Michael Gallup is somebody that going forward should be picked up as this, as the waivers go to hit this week. He shouldn't be available in very many leagues anymore. This Cowboys offense, They have a great quarterback. They do a decent bit of passing there, and we've seen Michael Gallup have big games in the past. So Michael Gallup, another guy that needs to be picked up. Number 6 here is going to be Bryan Edwards, which is a wide receiver for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's wide receiver 55 on the year. And look, this is another guy that has had added value since Rich Bisaccia took over as the head coach, and the way that they're running that offense. And look, Derek Carr is playing like an MVP right now. He is phenomenal. He's playing great. And if Bryan Edwards can continue to stay on the field, I like him going forward for the rest of the season as somebody that would be at least a flex option most weeks.
All right. And again, the Raiders are on a bye this week. So this is completely looking into your future, making sure you're good to go 2 weeks from now, not necessarily a player for this week, because you will probably be picked up on the wire this week. So you won't be able to get him next week. That's why Jeffe has him on the list for week 8. So to recap real quick, the 2 running backs Jeffe has on his list is Kenneth Gainwell and Brandon Bolden. And then he has 4, kind of 5 wide receivers. Allen Lazard, even though he's probably going to be out, replace him with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, possibly Randall Cobb in there as well. And then he also has Russell Gage, Michael Gallup, and Bryan Edwards on the list. So that wraps up Jeffe's Week 8 waiver wire picks. We'll move on to his top 10 running backs for Week 8 in fantasy football, and we will start at number 10.
All right, so number 10 this week, I believe, is going to be Dalvin Cook going up against the Cowboys. And I think, Dalvin Cook coming off of a bye week generally does really, really well. I expect him to have a good game here. And, look, I think this is going to be a game where they have to pass the ball. With Dallas, I feel like it's going to be more of a shootout, and Dalvin Cook getting that passing game value will give him a high value for this week. So Dalvin Cook is going to come in at number 10 for me this week. Number 9 is going to be Khalil Herbert going up against San Francisco. San Francisco is 16th against running backs. We just saw Jonathan Taylor had 18 for 107 and a touchdown against them, and Khalil Herbert just had 100 yards rushing against the Bucs defense, a defense that doesn't allow any team at all to get to 100 yards on them. They've been phenomenal against the run the last 2 years. And Khalil Herbert found a way, with as bad as that Bears offense is, I think a lot of credit needs to go to Khalil Herbert. He's been fantastic. And look, if David Montgomery keeps getting hurt, he's going to have to worry about losing his starting job and the Bears just moving on from David Montgomery. And being availability is the best ability in the NFL. And Khalil Herbert has been phenomenal, and I think he has another really good week. The good thing here is that Khalil Herbert was more involved in the passing game. He had 5 targets, 5 catches in the last game here. And so if he's going to continue to be involved to that degree and out-snap Damian Williams the way he was, then Khalil Herbert should be a top 10 back this week against San Francisco. And number 8 here is going to be Cordell Patterson going against Carolina, who is still first in the league in terms of fantasy against running backs. But look, if Mike Davis is out, which it looks like he may be, we'll have to monitor that as the week goes on. But really either way, the way Cordell Patterson has been playing, he has that value either way because he has the passing game value, because they pass so much in that offense. I think that Cordell Patterson could even take a bulk of the carries as the year unfolds, even if Mike Davis is healthy. I think he's been that good for them. He had the goal line value. He had a tough run from 3 yards out at the goal line, was able to punch it in. And so Cordell Patterson, I think, can have a big week against a Carolina team that's struggling. I know they're first against running backs in fantasy, but I think Cordell Patterson, with the all-around workhorse kind of workload that he should have this week, should come in as the number 8 running back.
Yeah, I agree. It sure seems like he has taken the most of his opportunity this year I have Mike Davis on one of my fantasy teams, and he really has not done anything for me. It's all been Cordell Patterson. So I like that pick there. Khalil Herbert, like you said, nobody has put up 100 rushing yards on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers except for one guy, and that was Khalil Herbert last week. So you can't go wrong there. He's definitely making a case for taking his opportunity and possibly taking over David Montgomery's spot, his job. So that'll be pretty interesting to see how that all plays out. I mean, if he keeps producing like he does, and David Montgomery keeps getting hurt, yeah, absolutely, the Bears may move off of him, which would be pretty crazy because David Montgomery is a pretty damn good back. So yeah, and then Dalvin Cook, number 10. It's Dalvin Cook, man. He's going to get his every single week. So I like all of them there. Let's move on to number 7.
All right, number 7 here is going to be Jonathan Taylor. I feel like I've had him somewhere 7th or 8th for like the last 3 weeks, but he's just so good and he's been so consistent over the last couple weeks. And if they're going to be insistent on getting Jonathan Taylor 20 touches a game with the talent that he has, he's going to produce against pretty much anybody in the league. And they're going up against Tennessee, who are 8th in terms of fantasy against running backs. But you also have to think Tennessee's secondary is so bad. Teams exploit that. But look, the Colts like to run the ball. Their whole game revolves around running the ball and passing through the play action, getting downfield. So Jonathan Taylor is a guy that is an obvious right now. He's a number 3 running back in terms of fantasy and 2nd in the league in rushing, and he has the passing game value that started to show up over the last 3-4 weeks. So Jonathan Taylor going against Tennessee, this is a huge game. I think both running backs in this game have a chance to have really, really big weeks, and Jonathan Taylor is going to come in at number 7 for me. Number 6 here is going to be Daryl Henderson going up against Houston, who is 21st in the league against running backs in terms of fantasy football. And the logic here is pretty clear, right? The Rams should be leading for most of this game, unless it's fluky like last week with the Lions and somehow the Texans are able to keep it close in this game. But we would expect, from what we've seen from the Texans have scored 8 points in the last 2 weeks. Going up against the Rams defense, the Rams should be leading for most of this game. So Daryl Henderson should get, 25, somewhere between 25 and 30 carries if I had to guess in this game. I expect him to get 2 touchdowns, over 100 yards, have a nice week. But because they aren't going to be passing a whole lot and they have great wide receivers, I don't think they're going to have to worry about getting Daryl Henderson in the pass game. So I would have him higher, especially, scoring 2 touchdowns will get you a lot of points. But I have him at number 6 this week.
Yeah, I can't argue with either one of those guys. Jonathan Taylor's I think he's 2nd right now to Derrick Henry in overall yards for the season. But he's been a beast the last few weeks. So I'm actually surprised you have him at number 7 and not higher up on this list, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's just because the guys that I have above him, I think, are going to have really big weeks.
Okay, fair enough. All right, to kind of recap, the first 5 in Jeffe's top 10, number 10 is Dalvin Cook, number 9, Khalil Herbert, number 8, Cordell Patterson, number 7, Jonathan Taylor, number 6, Daryl Henderson, and let's move on to number 5.
All right, starting off the top 5 here is going to be James Robinson. We have the Jags coming off of a bye week and going against Seattle, who just doesn't look good on either side of the ball. And, that Monday night game against the Saints was not good. It was ugly on both sides of the ball. And look, I think James Robinson has an opportunity. He's obviously getting the workhorse workload that we hoped he would. He's been getting it for a few games now, and he's going to have his opportunity to absolutely go off in this game against a Seattle team that is 31st in the league against running backs. And I think there's a chance, with the offensive line that Trevor Lawrence has, he's going to have to dump the ball off. Who's there? James Robinson. James Robinson, I believe, will have multiple touchdowns in this game and possibly over 100, should have over 100 scrimmage yards, in my opinion. So he's going to come in at number 5 for me this week. Number 4 here is going to be Naji Harris going up against Cleveland. And his analysis is pretty simple, right? Like, he's the modern day Le'Veon Bell. He's taking that place in that offense that they've been running for years, and he's, especially because of the wide receiver injuries that they have, he's going to get plenty of targets. He's going to get plenty of run. There's no telling how this game is going to go because Cleveland's injury report is so murky and they have so many guys there. You don't know who's playing, who's out, and how that's all going to affect the game. I think this is going to be a tough game. I think Najee's going to have a big game if the Steelers have any chance of winning, and I think he will have a big game. This is probably one where we see Najee have another 10 targets in this game. So I see him having a very big day against Cleveland here. He comes in at number 4. Number 3 is going to be another guy that's been very consistent, but quietly, because his team is 0-7. It's Deandre Swift going up against Philly, who is 30th against running backs. I feel like the running back that goes against Philly is on this list every week because Philly can't stop the run. They can't stop any running back, and obviously Deandre Swift has the value in the passing game. And this is a game where I could see the Lions having to keep up with Philly. But either way here, there's value for Deandre Swift. He's been one of the better backs in the entire NFL this year, whether it's the running game or the passing game. He's just so good, somebody that I wish I would have had more stock of this year, because he's just been fantastic week in, week out. He's going to provide you at least 20, and I think he has a chance to have a very big game here against the Eagles, so he comes in as number 3.
Yeah, I can't really add much more to what you've already said. James Robinson, I've been high on him all season long. He'll continue to do well, especially against the Seattle Seahawks. Weak defense. Naji Harris, huge passing game upside. Like you said, he's a modern-day Le'Veon Bell. He's been proving that. He has a very bright future ahead of him. And Deandre Swift, the Eagles are absolutely garbage on the defensive end, so I do think he will have a monster game as well. So to kind of recap overall before we head into the final 2, number 10, Dalvin Cook, number 9, Khalil Herbert, number 8, Cordell Patterson, number 7, Jonathan Taylor, number 6, Daryl Henderson, number 5, James Robinson, number 4, Naji Harris, number 3, Deandre Swift, and now we move into the final 2, and I can't believe you have this man as number 2 and not number 1.
Yeah, well, I've been having him as number 1, but Derrick Henry is my number 2 this week, going against the Colts, who are actually 3rd against running backs. But if we watch all the Colts games, so we know when Derrick Henry plays the Colts, he's going to have 100 yards. It doesn't matter how good this defense is. Derrick Henry finds a way to get 100 yards. These teams are very familiar with each other. And look, Derrick Henry was held to under 100 yards in the Chiefs game. He had like 30 yards in the second half of that game, which is very different than what they normally do. But the Titans took advantage of the Chiefs secondary in that game, which is why Tannehill had his best game of the season. Derrick Henry had his worst. They took advantage of what was there for him. And in this game, it's what we see from Derrick Henry against the Colts every time. Derrick Henry generally has a very good game against the Colts, and so I expect that to be the case here. If you watched our Pick'em show, I do think the Colts are going to win this game, but I do think Derrick Henry will continue to be a huge part of these games that happen in these matchups, and he'll have another, probably, 28, 30 points, 32 points. I could see him getting in the end zone a couple times. So Derrick Henry comes in at number 2 for me this week. Number 1 here is going to be Alvin Kamara up against Tampa Bay, who obviously has a very good run defense. So I understand why people would say, oh, you're crazy. But if you watch the game against Seattle, the passing game value for Alvin Kamara is back. Just in the first half of that game, he had 10 catches for, I think it was 109 yards and a touchdown. He was going off in that game. If the passing game value is there, and with Tampa likely to put a lot of pressure on Jameis is going to have to check it down to Alvin Kamara. I could see Kamara having a massive game here, 12, 13, 14 catches because they're going to have to keep dumping it off. And obviously, once you keep dumping it off, a couple of those are going to go for 0 yards. But if you get the ball into Alvin Kamara's hand, he'll make plays. He showed that against Seattle, and I think he can continue to do that, especially with what happens outside of the front four for the Bucs right now. There's so many injuries. Even the linebackers are starting to get hit with the injury bug. So I think Alvin Kamara has a good chance to be the number one back for the second week in a row.
It's a bold strategy there, Cotton, but you may be onto something. We'll see how that all plays out. So, all right, that's Jeffe's top 10 running backs for Week 8 of fantasy football. Would you like to recap it real quick?
Yep. So going through it real quick, we have number 10 running back this week is going to be Dalvin Cook. Number 9 this week is Khalil Herbert. Number 8 is Cordell Patterson. Number 7, Jonathan Taylor. Number 6, Daryl Henderson. Number 5 is James Robinson. Naji Harris comes in at 4. Deandre Swift is number 3. And Derrick Henry comes in at 2. Alvin Kamara, number 1, 2 weeks in a row.
There you have it. That's his top 10 running backs for Week 8. Let's move on to the top 10 receivers for Week 8 in fantasy football. We will start, as always, number 10.
Number 10 here, I had him at 10 last week, and he ended up not playing. But he's supposed to play this week from what I'm hearing. He's going to be getting back into practice. Should be playing this week. It's going to be Antonio Brown going up against New Orleans. He's 25th against wide receivers. And look, if he plays, I like him to get 12 targets in this game. I'm calling it because historically, Lattimore against Mike Evans get absolutely shut out of the game. Like he doesn't get catches, barely gets targets. Like Marshawn Lattimore just has the formula to Mike Evans. He is a kryptonite for him. So with him getting locked down, I think Antonio Brown coming back. We talked about last week. Tom Brady likes to abuse a slot receiver. I think he'll be able to do that with Antonio Brown needing to step up more this week. And Antonio Brown should have a very big game here against the Saints. And like I said, with the target share that he gets when he's in the lineup, this is obviously if he plays. But I do think Antonio Brown will be there, and I think he has a big game. Comes in at number 10 for me. Number 9 is another guy that it's a if he plays sort of thing. But it looks like Sterling Shepard should be able to come back this upcoming game, going up against Kansas City, who's actually surprisingly 9th in terms of fantasy against wide receivers, with a suspect as their secondary is. But Sterling Shepard is in the lineup. I like him to get a lot of targets. He's very good, and I think he can expose the secondary that we just saw A.J. Brown tear up. I think he can do a lot of the same things and absolutely annihilate Kansas City here. Have a nice little day for the Giants, who I actually picked to upset Kansas City. Sterling Shepard is a big part of that for me. And so I think he's going to be the number 9 wide receiver this week. Number 8 here is going to be Deontay Johnson going up against Cleveland, who's 22nd in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. And this one's pretty simple, right? His target share is just ridiculous. He should be a top 10 wide receiver most weeks as long as he's not dropping the ball, which he's done a better job of not dropping the ball this year than he did last year when he led the league in drops. And so Deontay Johnson, like I mentioned with Naji, with the injuries to the different wide receivers there's a huge opportunity for Deontay to get 12 targets a game at this point. And so I think that'll be the case this week. Like I mentioned earlier, it's going to be a hard-fought game. Deontay should be a big part of that for the Steelers this week. Comes in as my number 8 wide receiver.
All right. Number 10, you had Antonio Brown. I like Antonio Brown. He's definitely balled out this season. So if he is back in there, he is definitely a guy you want to have starting. He'll put up some good value. Sterling Shepard, normally I try to stay away from the Giants receivers just because how bad their offense is in general. However, they are going against the Kansas City Chiefs, who have a absolute horrendous secondary. So I could see Sterling Shepard having a big day there. Deontay Johnson, like you said, his target share is ridiculous. So he should have a pretty good week this week as well. So all right, number 7.
Number 7 for me this week is going to be Corlyn Sutton going up against Washington, who is 31st against wide receivers. Their secondary is absolutely terrible. And look, I know Sutton's value, and just like Tim Patrick, is largely based on quarterback play. But going up against a secondary that, like Washington has, he should eat. I think Corlyn Sutton has an opportunity to be one of the best wide receivers this year. He's come back from his ACL injury, and week by week, he's just shown that he is still the same player that we remembered him being a couple years ago. So Corlyn Sutton, somebody that I have high hopes for as the season goes on. Like I said, it's just, can the quarterback play be good enough for Sutton to be a week-to-week fantasy option, somebody that you can really feel comfortable with? I think at this point, with his target share, he should be at least a flex play for people every week. But this week, with the matchup being as good as it is against Washington here, Corlyn Sutton comes in at number 7 for me. DJ Moore is going to come in at number 6 for me, which this is kind of the same situation as Corlyn Sutton. It's a largely quarterback play based, which you could make that case for every receiver. But we've seen this with DJ Moore over the first 3 weeks. Sam Darnold was playing well against bad teams. DJ Moore, with his target share, was having great games. And even though DJ Moore continues to get a massive amount of target share, ever since CMC went out of the lineup, Sam Darnold has been absolute garbage. And it affects the entire team. But they're going up against the Falcons this year, who don't have a great secondary at all. They're 26th in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. So I think this can be one of those games where they figure out a way to put some points on the board. DJ Moore, I think, is going to be a big part of that. He's going to have to get thrown to a lot. Like, you got to get the best guy in your offense the ball, and I think they're going to have to do that this week. And what, earlier in the season, I wouldn't have thought this would be a hard-fought game. But look, the Falcons, I believe, have a winning record, if I'm not mistaken. And look, the Panthers are at this point trying to keep up with them. So I think this is going to be a big DJ Moore game, and he comes in at number 6 for me.
All right, yeah, I don't really have a whole lot more to add. Both of those guys are more than capable of having huge days, and they're going against some pretty weak secondaries. So I think they will kind of go over your first 5 in your top 10. Number 10, Antonio Brown. Number 9, Sterling Shepard against the Chiefs. Number 8, Deontay Johnson against the Browns. Number 7, Cortland Sutton against the Washington football team. And number 6, DJ Moore against the Atlanta Falcons. Let's go ahead and move into your top 5. We'll start with number 5.
All right, number 5 here is going to be Cooper Kupp, who I would have had higher if not for the matchup. And it's a good matchup. They're playing a bad team. I just don't think they're going to have to pass a lot, which I didn't think they were going to have to pass a lot against the Lions. But, again, that was a bit of a fluky game. I don't think that's going to happen again here against Houston. I think they'll be up for a majority of this game. But, with Cooper Kupp, his target share in that offense for when they do pass it, and his quarterback liking him when they get down to the red zone or even inside 40 yards, he'll find Cooper Kupp, and Cooper Kupp can make a play and get in the end zone. Like, Cooper Kupp is just one of the best wide receivers in the league, and I think he has another good week here. It's just hard not to put him in the top 10 somewhere. I had to find a place for him. He comes in as number 5 for me this week. Number 4 here is going to be Devos Samuel going up against Chicago. Chicago is 28th in terms of fantasy against wide receivers. And look, Devos Samuel sees a lot of targets, and he catches most balls, even in a bomb cyclone that happened on Sunday Night Football. Devos Samuel is still making plays. He makes plays in every game. He is so good, and really, quietly, again, this is another guy that's having a quiet year because his team isn't doing very well. But Devos Samuel is at this point cementing himself as one of the better receivers in the league. If he can continue this for the rest of the year, I could see people putting him in the top 10 of wide receivers in the league. He has been fantastic this year. And kind of another guy, quarterback play's been a little spotty, but he seems matchup proof at this point and weather proof at this point. From what we've seen, I think he has another big week here. Comes in at number 4 for me. Number 3 is going to be DeAndre Hopkins. In lieu of the fact that the Cardinals are inevitably going to stomp the Packers this week because the top 2 receivers are out and their defensive coordinator is out. Look, the stars come out when the lights come on. It always happens. DeAndre Hopkins, every primetime game I've ever watched DeAndre Hopkins in, he was special. Not great. He was special. DeAndre Hopkins in primetime is everything you want when you want to watch a primetime football game. And I think he's going to have a big week here. It would be a bigger week, but again, I think the Cardinals are going to lead for most of this game. I don't think it's going to be much of a competition, unfortunately. So DeAndre Hopkins, another good game here for the Cardinals, coming in as number 3 for me this week, which is saying a lot because these next 2 guys I think are going to have real good weeks.
And that's really interesting. I've never really thought of that, but you're absolutely right. Like DeAndre Hopkins in primetime shows up and shows how good he is almost every single time. I've never really thought about that. That's interesting.
Because it's every single one. Like I can remember the catch he had that he somehow as going to the ground and the ball stayed on him and then he reached and grabbed it through his leg. Like that was on prime time. Like the craziest things in his career. The Hail Mary was on prime time. Like he's crazy when the lights come on.
Yeah, he is. All right. So number 5, Cooper Kupp. He's a every week guy. Obviously, he's getting his points. And Deebo Samuel, same thing. I mean, he balls out every single week, it seems like. So he's there at number 4, number 3, DeAndre Hopkins. All right. We'll move into the top 2 here. I'm actually surprised you don't have this one number 1 either. What's going on, man?
Yes, Stephon Diggs going against Miami. I thought about putting him at number 1, but I think what's happening with the Bills offense this year from a fantasy perspective it's working well, but they're spreading the ball out more. They have Emmanuel Sanders, Cole Beasley, Dawson Knox, who's out for a few weeks, but being replaced by Todd Sweeney, I believe his name is, who's another athletic tight end. Like they're finding ways to get everybody involved, even 2 running backs. They're using 2 running backs in the offense. So the amount of targets that you would have hoped to see Stephon Diggs getting, he's not. But he's still getting enough work and he's still got enough talent. And Josh Allen still has a big enough arm that I think Stephon Diggs going up against a really bad Miami team has a chance to have a very good week. And I've said that a few times. He's disappointed me a couple times. I've had him in the top 3 a few times, but I think this is the one. Look, the last time these teams played earlier this season, it was a one-sided affair. The Dolphins got the dog shit kicked out of them. So I think it's going to be the same thing. I think the Bills, you got to remember, the Bills are coming off a bye, so they're going to be fresh. They're also coming off of a really tough loss against the Titans before the bye week, and they had extra time to think about that. And they're going to come in looking to make a point. And I don't think it mattered who the Bills play this week. I think it's going to be a problem for anybody. Unfortunately for the Dolphins, it's them. And I think it's going to be a slaughter fest. I think Stephon Diggs is going to be the lead dog in that slaughter fest for the Bills. He comes in as number 2 for me this week, having a big week. I think he is going to have a very big week. Number 1, I think, is going to be a huge week, a 40-point kind of week. That's going to be Justin Jefferson.
That's pretty bold.
Pretty bold. And Justin Jefferson going against Dallas, who was actually 27th against wide receivers. But look, Kirk Cousins has played good football this year. which is good for the entire passing game. And obviously, Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen are 1A, 1B, but I think Justin Jefferson is the better of the two. And I think this is going to be a huge Justin Jefferson game. I think it's going to be one of those back and forth kind of shootout games. We've seen Dallas's defense, they'll get a turnover. Trey Diggs will find a way to intercept the ball at some point in this game. But I think both of these offenses are very good, and I think both of these offenses are going to have good days. It's going to be a high-scoring game, in my opinion, and I think Justin Jefferson is going to be the guy in this game that goes absolutely nuts. It just feels like it. Look, I'm predicting a 10 catches, 130-yard, 2-touchdown game for Justin Jefferson. I wouldn't be surprised if he had even more yards added on to those. That's just, being modest. 13 yards a catch. I could see him having 17 yards a catch in this game. So Justin Jefferson, somebody that I like Justin Jefferson a lot. I think he's a top 5 wide receiver in the league. He's in a good offense. I think he is a number 1 wide receiver in Week 8.
Damn. That is a monstrous game you were predicting. So we're gonna have to save this, and we're gonna talk about this next week, whether you hit this one on the head or not. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. You said 10 catches, 130 plus yards, and 2 touchdowns.
Yep. And I went back before I started changing everything on the sheet for this week. I was going back to see how I did for last week. And last week, I wasn't only pretty close on some of the top 10s for both running backs and wide receivers, but the games played out and the value that I had for him, the valuation that I had for him here pretty much played out exactly how I thought. So I think as the year's going on, I'm starting to get more accurate. So I think I'll be pretty close on this one.
And that's why they call you the goddamn guru.
That's damn right.
All right. That's your Jeffe's top 10 wide receivers for Week 8 fantasy football. Go ahead and recap that real quick.
Yeah, so number 10 is Antonio Brown here. Sterling Shepard comes in at 9. Deontay Johnson, number 8. Corlyn Sutton is going to be number 7 this week. Number 6 this week is going to be DJ Moore. Top 5, starting out the top 5 here for Week 8 is Cooper Kupp. Devos Samuel is going to be number 4 this week. DeAndre Hopkins in prime time is going to have a big game and be number 3 this week. Stephon Diggs going to have a big game, be number 2 against Miami this week. And Justin Jefferson, one of the top 5 wide receivers in the league, has a top 1 performance this week.
There you have it. Jeffe's Week 8 top 10 wide receivers for fantasy football. All right, that's all we have for you guys this week. Jeffe, you want to say anything before we get out of here?
No, there's really nothing else to add. Like you said, you'll be able to find Zach's weekly stardoms and situms at our website, horsemansports.com. So we're sorry we can't put that in the video this week, but Zach is prepared for that, and we'll have that, guys, for you on the website.
All right. We appreciate you all tuning in. Hopefully, Jeffe and I were able to provide you with some insight to help get you an advantage in your fantasy league. Real quick, we also have a poll up on our website, horsemansports.com, that we'd love for you to hop on and cast a quick vote. And as Jeffe really tried to say, you can also find my Week 8 Surefire Stardoms and Situms there as well. If you're looking to take your fantasy team to the next level, we also offer other premium exclusive content on our website. That is horsemansports.com. As always, special shout out to our WUBI Live listeners for tuning in. You can catch the Horseman Pro Football Talk podcast and Fantasy Central back to back on WUBI Live every Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The app is available for download for free in your app store, or you can visit wubi.live for more information. Good luck to you all this weekend. It has been a pleasure, and we will see you next week.